Um, Obviously, it's a huge topic. So let's just say I laid out everything for the landowner. I laid out, let's say, 10 acres of timber stand improvement on the one side of the ridge, a food plot on the top of the ridge, and a tree stand for the predominant wind based upon that bedding area that is created through a timber harvest or hinge cutting, or just the application of herbicides on invasive species to open up for sunlight to get to the forest floor. So I, once that's all laid out, I'm pretty much going right into food right afterwards. Once you have cover, I usually go to food. So let's just say a guy has a lot of ag land around him and he's got a lot of corn and soybeans and alfalfa around him. I really wouldn't really harper on planting a lot of spring or summer food at that point, because your deer are going to get the nutrition around from the other landowners around you. Like I always said, and like my dad and my brother, we always talk about this. We don't care where the big buck are at during the summertime. That does not matter to me. I want them to be on the property in the fall and winter during the hunting season. So honestly, I don't care if that buck's 5 miles away feeding in a soybean field somewhere and people are all over watching him. I know where he's going to be later on when fall and winter roll around. So, and then for instance, then like with me, with our property, with it being a big woods property, we do have a little bit of ag land below us, but just for example, for you guys to kind of get the gist of this, the landowner below us plants corn every single year. And it's normally cut for silage every single year. So when that corn gets cut, there is nothing for the white-tailed deer at that point. There's nothing for turkey or deer at that point. They hit the woods, they hit the acorns. So we got a timber harvest. So we released a lot of the oak trees within our forest, and that's definitely helping with acorn production. And second of all, I like to add food plots on the property. I am absolutely a food plot fanatic. I love supplementing the native browse in our woods. And with us, I do a mixture of everything. I do mixtures of clover. I'll do different brassicas, your turnips, your radishes, your cereal grains, like your wheat, your oats, your winter rye. And I usually throw an annual clover in there within that mix. And that would be crimson clover. So, and you can add winter peas. I add hairy vetch to some of the food plots, and that's all to give diversity for those deer and turkey and other animals to feed on. So once the food plot program is established, I usually like going right into, okay, where can I put the water sources next? Fortunately for us, we have a lot of springs on the property. So there's a couple little spots where we put water holes in at spots adjacent to food sources, adjacent to tree stand locations, or just where the deer are traveling in general. And I tell you what, on those dry years, especially those dry years, the deer and turkey and bear especially too, they are all going to that water source. Food, cover, water, those are your three main things that you can do for wildlife. I mean, I always say this to the landowners when I'm going and checking out their property, and for them to understand it a little bit easier, I want to be, for instance, if I'm going somewhere to go on vacation, I want to stay in the best hotel possible. I want breakfast in the morning. I want a good bed to sleep in. I want conditions to be right. If it's AC or if it's heat, I want to be close to all the amenities. I mean, and that's the same way with white-tailed deer, turkey, everything we manage for, grouse, rabbit, squirrel, all the game species and non-game species. You got to have places where they can eat, where they can sleep, and where they can drink. And I'm just going to add this yet to it, to have breeding opportunities, like with turkeys. If you're in a big woods setting, I would suggest putting in a food plot or a wildlife opening. It doesn't necessarily have to be a food plot. Is clearing the woods out and keep it maintained, maybe in grasses or a clover mix or something, where turkeys can come in, gobblers, especially the toms, they can strut and do their mating rituals. that's so vital so that the turkeys can see each other and understand the breeding situation, and they also have that big area to watch for predators. So it just makes it way easier for turkeys to breed and to feed, and also have a good hunting experience yet too on top of that, because you know where they're going to be. So based upon those aspects, we can even go a step further. We can plant fruit trees. Let's say your property is lacking hard mass and soft mass production. So I'll jump into this a little bit. And if you guys have any questions on where to find trees at the end of this, I can push you towards a very good friend of mine that has a wildlife nursery pretty close to where I live. And I can tell you his website, and he's got a Facebook page as well. But just in the last couple of years, even on our property, I suggested on other landowners' properties. I'm going to keep talking about Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania has the most variety of trees in the Northeast, in my opinion. We got red oak, we got white oak, we got beech nut, we got hickory nuts, we have cherries, you name it, what a grape, greenbrier, everything that produces a berry, and that's going to produce browse too as well. But what we're lacking in a lot of these landscapes today is native fruit trees. I'm talking about wild apple trees, pear trees, persimmons, plum. With farming practices and cleanup of private lands and fence rows, everybody's doing a lot of cleanup, and it's not good for our wildlife, and it's not good for promoting native species to keep thriving and keep producing, so that they can, keep living their life stages and producing cover and food for wildlife. So just a couple trees that I have planted on our property consists of chestnut, even if it's the Dunstan chestnut, the Chinese chestnut. Chinese and Dunstan are both blight resistant, which is in the ground. It's a fungus that's in the ground that can that kills the American chestnut, which was originally here on the landscape in the Northeast. Millions of trees at one point. Pretty much Pennsylvania was covered in roughly 70 to 80% chestnut trees, if you can believe that or not. So you can honestly see that our wildlife thrived way back in the early 1900s due to all that hard mass every single year. So, that's definitely a tree to add in your landscape. Then you're going to get production at the end of September, early October, even through October yet. So once you get fruit trees on the property, you want to be planting them you want to be getting varieties that drop fruit or nuts early, mid, and late. If you have food, you control the wildlife. It's just, there is no question about that. If you have the food, you have the good cover, and you have the water source there, and nobody else is doing that around you, you have the wildlife. Another tree I'd like to talk about is the apple tree. Even if it's the regular apples that me and you eat every day, if it's a crab apple, there's different varieties out there that are more essentially related to wildlife. Obviously, you want to get more of the trees related to wildlife and their growth habits, more so than what you would getting for a human, because those trees tend to drop a little earlier, and they're maybe not disease resistant compared to the trees that have been growing on the landscape for years that are, good cover and good food value for the wildlife. So I'm going to recommend to you guys out there to get crab apples, because they're a smaller apple. They produce a lot more. And like I said, obviously they're smaller for the deer to eat and turkeys to consume and whatnot. And you want to get varieties there too that drop early, mid, and late. You want to try to do that. You want to try to cover those 3 stages. So like late summer, early fall, and like mid fall, like early winter, and then you want to go through early winter to like spring green up. Those are the crucial times that you want to be having food consistently on the ground. Also, another tree that is pretty well known to a lot of you guys out there, especially guys that have land too, is the pear trees. Um, I mean, producing Hunkin Dunkin pears about the size of a softball. I mean, you can really grow some high quality pear trees, and deer absolutely love them. I mean, I hope to point you guys in the right direction for buying trees from the guy that I know, because his products are super amazing, and he's day in and day out he's doing awesome work. And his pear trees, his apple trees, his chestnut trees, they're absolutely phenomenal for your wildlife. So, and like I said too, I'm going to keep preaching on this, and it might get old, but you want an early, mid, and late season pear varieties. You want all three. And for instance, when I plant orchards of them, I'm planting the early, the mid, and the late season trees all in the same area, because they all need to pollinate each other. And it's really crucial that you at least have 3 trees for good pollination. You always want to know where to plant those orchards based upon the wind, so that when the pollen's blowing around, it's getting to those other flowers to produce fruit. And obviously, we often forget about this, and I do too a lot of times, you're going to help your pollinator species out too, your bees and your butterflies and whatnot. And that's just going to help, push pollen around it. And obviously hummingbirds too, as well, and different bird varieties too. You're not only helping your game species out that most of us want to see thrive as hunters, but you're helping every other species out on the landscape as well. So it always gives you that satisfaction that you're helping other wildlife out as well. While you're sitting in the tree stand, you may see a couple different bird species, or a weasel, or whatever it is that you can't hunt, but you get to enjoy because you're improving the land.